Have you ever experienced this? You watch a YouTube video about how to learn faster, you get excited, and you tell yourself, "This time, I'm going to study for real." But 20 minutes later, you're watching a random tutorial on how to build a log cabin in the middle of the forest. The excitement was real, but it faded as quickly as it appeared. Your brain seemed ready to focus, but then it took a detour, and in the end, you're left with that same feeling. You don't remember anything, you didn't move forward, and worst of all, you feel guilty. This isn't your fault. It's not because you lack discipline or because you're not smart enough. The truth is deeper. Your brain simply isn't designed to handle the flood of stimuli it faces every single day. You don't forget because you're stupid. You forget because your mind is overloaded, poorly trained, and constantly hijacked by endless notifications, feeds, and distractions. Eastern philosophy knew this centuries ago. Zen masters compared the restless mind to a turbulent lake. As long as the water is in motion, no reflection appears. The moon can be shining brightly in the sky, but you won't see it. Only when the surface is calm does the reflection emerge. Learning works the same way. If your mind is a rave of endless stimuli, it reflects nothing. Knowledge simply has no space to settle. Modern science confirms this. Cognitive psychology calls it cognitive load. In simple terms, it means our working memory has strict limits, like a small hard drive. Imagine trying to run an 80 GB game on a 2 GB computer. It freezes, crashes, refuses to work. When you try to study while watching lectures at 2x speed, replying to WhatsApp messages, and scrolling TikTok on a second screen, you're forcing your brain to do something it was never built to handle. Researchers at Stanford University, led by Clifford Nass in 2009, found that people who claim to be great multitaskers actually perform worse on simple tasks that require attention. They get distracted more easily, retain less, and confuse irrelevant information with what really matters. In other words, the more you try to do everything at once, the less you truly learn. According to the American Psychological Association, switching constantly between tasks can reduce your productivity by up to 40%. Think about that. Almost half of your energy is wasted just shifting your focus. It's like driving a car while pulling the handbrake at every turn. No matter how much you step on the gas, you'll never reach full speed. Here's the bottom line. Your brain is not multitasking, it's single tasking. It's like an old 2006 internet cafe computer that froze just by opening MSN while a song played in the background. It can only do one thing at a time, and barely. When you divide your attention, you're sabotaging memory consolidation. That feeling of, "I saw this yesterday but I forgot everything," isn't your memory failing. It's your study environment, broken and scattered. Zen philosophy has a principle called ichigyo zamai, total focus on a single action. When the monk sweeps the floor, he only sweeps. When he drinks tea, he only drinks tea. This simple yet powerful idea reminds us that the mind grows strong only when it learns to be fully present in one thing at a time. But today we do the opposite. The students believe they're studying just because they're busy. They keep their notebooks open, videos playing, colorful highlighters marking every sentence. But the truth is, they're just fooling themselves with a sense of productivity. The brain is tricked into believing it's doing something useful, but in reality, it's nothing more than information slipping in one ear and out the other. And here's the worst part. It's exhausting. You end the day mentally drained, but with nothing truly learned. It's like trying to carry 8 grocery bags with one hand. You might manage a few steps, but soon the weight and fatigue stop you from going further. Neuroscience warns us. When we overload the mind with simultaneous stimuli, the result is collapse. Working memory can't handle it. The brain freezes, and in that environment, any attempt at deep learning becomes impossible. But here's the good news. If the problem is overstimulation, the solution begins with simplicity. Before you open YouTube for another lecture, close unnecessary tabs, silence your phone, and choose just one thing to focus on. It might feel boring at first, it might even feel slower, but it's infinitely more effective. In silence, in focus, the mind organizes itself and finally learns. If you've made it this far, it means you value this kind of deep reflection, where science and philosophy come together to transform the way we learn. And I have a special invitation for you. Consider becoming a channel member. Your support helps keep high-quality, research-driven content like this alive. Plus, you'll gain access to exclusive perks. It's a way for us to walk this path together. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into how learning really works and why most people fail at the most important step of the entire process. Once you realize the problem isn't your intelligence, but the way your attention is constantly hijacked, you begin to see learning through a new lens. Working memory, the mental whiteboard we use to process new information, has strict limits. Cognitive psychology shows that on average, we can handle about 7 items at once. 7, not 50, not 100. Now think about it. When you open a lecture in one browser tab, keep your phone buzzing with messages, play music in the background, and glance at social media notifications, how many items are competing for that tiny working memory? Way more than 7. The outcome is obvious. You lose the battle before it even starts. This is why Eastern traditions always emphasized repetition and simplicity. A samurai didn't try to master 10 sword strikes in one day. He practiced the same cut thousands of times until it became instinct. There was no rush, no illusion that more meant better, only consistency, focus, and depth. The Taoist master, Lao Tzu, wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "To gain knowledge, add things every day. To gain wisdom, remove things every day." In other words, excess is not strength. It's noise. Wisdom isn't about cramming more into your mind, but about creating space for what truly matters. Modern science agrees. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that digital overload increases cortisol, the stress hormone, which damages focus and memory consolidation. It's like trying to study while an alarm blares in your ear. Your body may endure it for a while, but your brain never reaches deep focus. Another study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that constant exposure to notifications fragments attention in a long-term way. Heavy multitaskers don't just lose focus in the moment. They rewire their brains to favor superficial processing. Even simple tasks, like reading a quiet text, become harder. The mind itself adapts to chaos. That may sound discouraging, but it's also empowering. Because the solution isn't impossible, it doesn't require genius. It only requires a change in habits. Training your mind to value silence, reduce distractions, and return to doing one thing at a time can completely transform how you learn. Zen monks have practiced this for centuries. A monk who spends hours watching his breath isn't wasting time. He's training his mind to be steady, to resist the pull of distractions, to develop the strength of focus. That simple discipline is one of the most powerful learning tools ever discovered. In practical terms, it means this: before studying, prepare your environment. Close the extra tabs. Silence the notifications. Choose one material and one task. Don't aim for endless hours. Aim for short, concentrated sessions. You'll retain more, and you'll avoid mental burnout. Eastern wisdom also insists that learning is more than mechanical memorization. It requires intention. Confucius once said, "What I hear I forget, what I see I remember, what I do I understand." Knowledge must be lived, not just consumed. Here's the real shock. The problem isn't you, it's the environment you've been forced into. Your brain evolved to hunt, to build, to focus on singular challenges. But in the modern world, it's drowning in infinite feeds and notifications. No wonder you feel stuck. But the moment you see this truth, you already step ahead of the majority. Because now you know you don't need to fight against your brain. You just need to create the right conditions for it to do what it was designed to do. And that's where we're headed next. In the following chapter, we'll dive into the heart of learning itself. You'll discover what science and philosophy both reveal about how knowledge is truly consolidated and why so many people fail at the most crucial step. In the first chapter, we uncovered a hard truth. The biggest obstacle to learning isn't a lack of intelligence, it's distraction and overload. Now that we've identified the problem, it's time to go deeper. How does learning actually work? And why do most people fail at the very step that matters the most? Science tells us that learning follows three essential stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Think of them as gears in a machine. If one gear jams, the whole mechanism fails. Encoding is when your brain first takes in new information. It's what happens when you read a text, watch a lecture, or hear an explanation. In that moment, your brain turns external stimuli into electrical and chemical signals, forming the first neural connections. But those early connections are fragile, like footprints in the sand that the next wave will wash away. Storage is the second stage. Here the brain organizes and consolidates what you've encoded, placing it into long-term memory. Structures like the hippocampus help file the information away, almost like saving a document into a folder. This makes the memory more stable, but still not foolproof. And then comes the most critical stage, retrieval. This is when you bring knowledge back when you need it. It's the moment in an exam when you recall a formula, in a meeting when you remember an argument, or in daily life when the right piece of knowledge suddenly clicks. Without retrieval, the other two stages are meaningless. It's like installing an app on your phone but never setting up the account. When you try to use it, nothing works. Here's the catch. Most people only focus on the first two stages. They watch lectures, underline texts, make colorful notes. They feel productive, like they're building knowledge. But when the time comes to use it, their minds go blank. It's that moment in the exam when you stare at a question and think, "I've never seen this in my life," even though you studied it yesterday. This is where active retrieval comes in, the step almost everyone neglects. Active retrieval means forcing your brain to recall information without looking at the material. It's uncomfortable. It feels harder. But that's the point. Every time you attempt retrieval, you strengthen the neural pathways, like lifting weights to build muscle. A famous study by Rodiger and Karpika, published in the Journal of Memory and Language in 2006, proved this clearly. Students who spent time self-testing instead of just rereading performed up to 50% better a week later than those who only reviewed the text multiple times. This is the power of the testing effect. Eastern philosophy resonates deeply with this. Picture a Japanese archer practicing Kyudo, the way of the bow. Mastery doesn't come from simply aiming at a target once. It comes from repeating every gesture, every breath, every posture. When he misses, he doesn't see failure. He sees refinement. Each mistake is a guidepost toward mastery. Students in the study who practiced retrieval found it harder. They felt frustrated, less confident. But ironically, that discomfort was exactly what made the learning stick. Just like in the dojo, struggle in training prepares the warrior for real battle. Think about your own experience. How many times have you read a text over and over, convinced you understood it, only to freeze when someone asked you to explain it? That false sense of familiarity is the trap. Rereading feels productive, but it doesn't train retrieval. It's like staring at a map repeatedly, but never trying to navigate without it. When you're actually on the road, you're lost. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. One way to interpret this is simple. The student, who is willing to try, fail, and try again, keeps the mind alive, creative, and flexible. The one who only consumes passively gets stuck, rigid, and stagnant. And that's the real battle of the mind, fighting the illusion of learning. Because illusions are comfortable. They give us the pleasant feeling of progress without the discomfort of effort, but they're dangerous. They make us think we know when in reality we don't. Self-deception is the greatest enemy of growth. In the next block, we'll push this battle further. We'll look at the science of spaced repetition, the neuroscience of long-term memory, and why mistakes are your greatest allies. We'll see how time, rest, and repetition shape the brain. And we'll discover how science and Eastern wisdom converge on one truth: the hard path is the effective one. If active retrieval is the hidden key to learning, then time is the force that locks it in place. You can't expect to study something once and keep it forever. The human brain is not a hard drive. It's alive, it forgets, it reshapes itself. To retain knowledge, you have to revisit it. And not just randomly, but strategically. This is where spaced repetition comes in. In 2008, psychologist John Cepeda and his team published a meta-analysis covering over 250 studies on memory and learning. The conclusion was unmistakable. Reviewing material at gradually increasing intervals drastically improves retention. For example, study today, review tomorrow, then after 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks. Each review makes the memory stronger. Why does this work? Because when you force your brain to recall something after time has passed, it interprets that effort as a sign of importance. It says, if this keeps coming back, it must matter. And so, the neural connections tied to that memory grow stronger. Neuroscience explains this process through something called long-term potentiation, LTP. It's a biological mechanism where the connections between neurons strengthen when they're repeatedly activated over time. Every review is like another workout session for your brain. Just like muscles grow with repeated training, memories grow with repeated recall, but spaced repetition alone isn't enough. It becomes much more powerful when paired with the testing effect we discussed earlier. That's the dynamic duo of learning. Review at the right intervals, but always test yourself instead of just rereading. It's like practicing a sword strike and also sparring in combat. You're not just repeating, you're applying under pressure. In practical terms, this means you shouldn't spend hours staring at the same chapter over and over. Instead, read once, wait a while, then close the book and explain it in your own words. When you struggle or fail, that's not a sign of weakness. It's the brain saying, pay attention here. The next time, the memory will be sharper. The Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, in the Book of Five Rings, wrote, "It is by repetition that mastery is attained." He wasn't only talking about combat, he was talking about life itself. Every repetition done with intention shapes you. Science backs this up. Studies show that even one spaced review can double retention compared to no review at all. That means you could learn more by studying less, as long as you respect the rhythm of your brain. And this rhythm teaches another powerful truth: consistency beats intensity. Most people still believe in marathon study sessions. They cram 8 hours in a single day hoping it will stick. But by the next morning, most of it has faded. The brain simply doesn't work that way. Eastern wisdom illustrates this beautifully. Before bamboo shoots into the sky, it spends years strengthening its roots underground. To the outside world, nothing seems to happen. But when it's ready, it grows rapidly and becomes nearly unbreakable. Learning is the same. Invisible repetitions, quiet reviews, small acts of focus. They build the roots of knowledge And then there's the role of error. In our culture, mistakes are seen as failures, as something shameful. But to the brain, mistakes are vital signals. When you fail to recall something, your brain goes into alert mode. This matters. Don't lose it again. That alert strengthens the very pathways that help you remember correctly next time. A study published in Science showed that students who made errors and then received feedback learned faster than those who got everything right on the first try. The act of being wrong sharpened their attention and cemented the correction. In Japan, there's the principle of Kaizen, or continuous improvement. It's not about perfection on the first try, it's about steady growth, using every error as fuel. The swordsman who missteps refines his stance. The student who misses an answer builds a stronger memory the next time. So the true battle of the mind isn't against difficulty, it's against the illusion of easy learning. The illusion that watching, highlighting, or rereading is enough. It isn't. Growth demands testing, repetition, and even failure. This is where science and philosophy meet. Science gives us the tools: spaced repetition, active recall, long-term potentiation. Philosophy gives us the attitude: patience, discipline, and respect for the process. Together, they form the path to true learning. In the next chapter, we'll leave theory behind and step into practice. I'll show you 3 powerful techniques that can make you learn up to 10 times faster. We'll explore Feynman's method of teaching, how to implement spaced reviews in daily life, and why active learning trumps passive consumption. And finally, we'll tie it all together with a reflection that may change the way you see not just studying, but life itself. Rhythm always beats intensity. Up to this point, we've seen 2 critical truths. First, your brain was not designed for multitasking or overstimulation. Second, true learning depends on 3 stages, and the most important, retrieval, is usually ignored. Now it's time to move from theory to practice. In this chapter, you'll discover 3 proven techniques that can dramatically accelerate your learning. But they are not just tricks. They represent deeper attitudes toward knowledge and life itself. Because learning is not only about memorizing facts, it's about building presence, discipline, and resilience. The first technique is the Feynman method. Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, was known not only for his brilliance, but also for his ability to explain complex ideas in a simple, almost playful way. He believed that if you truly understand something, you should be able to explain it to a child. Here's how it works. After learning a concept, try to teach it in the simplest words possible. If you stumble, that's a signal. It means you haven't mastered it yet. That gap tells you exactly where to focus your review. Far from being failure, those stumbles are like signposts, pointing you to what really needs work. A study at Cornell University confirmed the power of this method. Students who explained concepts to peers retained up to 30% more than those who studied alone. Why? Because teaching forces the brain to process information actively instead of letting it float passively. It organizes thoughts, strengthens connections, and fills in the blanks. Eastern wisdom echoes this. Zen teachers often say, if you can't explain it simply, you haven't understood it with your heart. A master is not someone who speaks in riddles, but someone who distills complexity into clarity. To teach is to engrave knowledge into your own mind. The second technique is spaced repetition combined with active testing. We've already talked about both concepts separately, but together they form a powerful duo. Instead of binge studying for hours, spread your sessions across days and weeks. Today, tomorrow, 3 days later, 1 week later, 2 weeks later. With each review, don't just reread, test yourself. Cover the material, close the notebook, and recall it from memory. This feels harder. It takes more effort. But effort is exactly what makes memories last. Neuroscience has proven it. The harder the brain works to recall, the stronger the connection becomes. The National Training Laboratories reported that teaching someone else or practicing retrieval can raise retention rates to as high as 90%, compared to as little as 20% for passive listening. Think about that difference. One method makes you forget almost everything. The other makes you remember almost everything. The third technique is active learning. This is where most modern students fail. They think watching 10 videos in a row equals studying. It doesn't. Consumption is not creation. Active learning means producing something from what you learn. Write a summary in your own words. Create a mind map. Record yourself explaining the topic out loud. Apply the concept in a small project. Even a quick social media post counts, as long as you transform passive intake into active output. Here's the golden rule. Every hour of study should end with a creation. If there's no output, there's no true learning. Japanese tradition describes this through shuhari, the 3 stages of mastery. First, shu, follow the form, repeat and imitate. Second, ha, break the form, adapt and question. Third, rai, transcend the form, create something new. Active learning is what carries you from the first stage to the last. All 3 techniques, the Feynman method, spaced repetition with testing, and active learning, share a common principle. They're uncomfortable. They take effort. They demand more than just sitting back and consuming. But that's why they work. And behind all of them lies one great truth. Rhythm beats intensity. This is the most important lesson of all. Forget the idea of all-night cramming sessions. Forget the fantasy of learning an entire subject in a weekend. The brain doesn't thrive on sprints. It thrives on steady rhythm. In the next block, we'll dive deeper into this principle. You'll see why consistency outshines talent, how Eastern philosophy reinforces this mindset, and how to turn your routine into a lifelong path of growth. If there's one mistake almost every student makes, it's believing that faster learning equals harder studying. I'll pull an all-nighter. I'll binge 10 lectures in one sitting. I'll solve 50 problems back to back. This kind of brute force intensity feels productive, but in practice, it's like running a marathon without training. You might start strong, but soon your body and your brain collapse. Neuroscience shows us why. The brain strengthens neural connections through long-term potentiation, LTP, which is built on repetition over time, not on single bursts of effort. Each time you revisit knowledge, those synapses get a little stronger. But when you ignore it for too long, the connections weaken. That's why consistency beats intensity every single time. Think of brushing your teeth. You don't brush for 3 hours once a week and expect to be fine. You brush a few minutes every day. That small, regular act is what protects your health. Learning is exactly the same. It's not about cramming once, it's about rhythm. Eastern wisdom mirrors this lesson. In Zen, meditation is a daily practice. No one expects enlightenment from sitting once for 8 hours. The power comes from returning to silence every day, even for just a few minutes. The habit builds the transformation. The samurai knew this too. They didn't wait for a great battle to practice every strike at once. They trained daily, calmly, repeatedly, until each move became part of their body. The sword was no longer separate. It was an extension of the warrior himself. That kind of mastery only comes from rhythm. Psychologists at Duke University found that about 40% of daily actions are habits. That means if you turn study into a habit, it stops being a fight. You don't need to find motivation every day. It becomes automatic, like tying your shoes or taking a shower. And this leads us to one of the greatest truths of learning. Consistency beats talent. Think about it. How many people do you know who are naturally gifted but never get anywhere because they lack discipline? And how many ordinary people achieve extraordinary results because they show up every single day? The difference isn't intelligence, it's rhythm. Here's another important reminder: don't compare yourself to others. Each mind has its own pace, just as every tree has its own rhythm of growth. Bamboo spends years building roots underground before it shoots upward. The sunflower blooms quickly in weeks. Both follow their path. Neither is wrong. Your learning journey will have its own timing. Respect it. When we bring science and philosophy together, the formula for real learning becomes clear: a distraction-free environment, because your brain can't multitask. The right techniques: Feynman, spaced repetition, active testing, and active learning. A steady rhythm, because repetition over time engraves knowledge into the mind. But there's a fourth element too: patience with yourself. Eastern philosophy teaches that the path matters more than the destination. Learning isn't about getting there fast, it's about not quitting the journey. Miyamoto Musashi once said, "Victory is not won in a single instant, but in every small act of preparation." The same is true for your studies. Every short session of focus, every attempt to recall, every explanation you give, these are your victories. Together, they create mastery. So if you take one lesson from this entire journey, let it be this: rhythm is greater than intensity. 20 minutes a day, fully focused, will outdo 10 hours of cramming in the long run. The secret isn't in sprinting faster, but in never stopping. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 techniques will you start using today? The Feynman method, spaced repetition with testing, active learning? Share it in the comments, because your commitment might inspire someone else on the same path. And if you want me to go even deeper, bringing more techniques, more strategies, and more reflections, just write, "I want part 2." It will be a pleasure to continue this conversation with you. Until then, remember, learning fast doesn't mean knowing everything. It means never giving up on learning. Walk at your rhythm, test yourself, fail, repeat. Because in the end, the world is still yours to master.